So before we had eggnog, we had this. Posset, which was a creamy cocktail that dated all the way back to the 1600s. So stick around if you want to find out why we drink eggnog at Christmas and what the original one tastes like. So at this festive time of year, many people love to drink eggnog. But as with so many sins against alcohol, everyone's favourite custardy fever dream actually originated in Britain. Since the Middle Ages, the go-to creamy drink of choice was something called posset. A posset was a warm, sweet, creamy drink most often made with milk, cream, spices and alcohol. But because it was once so popular, there are so many recipes for sack posset to choose from. So I've chosen one from the 1700s, which is very special to me for reasons I'll come on to later. But we're also going to look at the history of how eggnog evolved from a medieval drink favoured by monks. So this is how you make a 300-year-old recipe for sack posset. The first step in the recipe tells us to take 3 pints of cream. Most modern eggnog recipes that I've seen will use cream maybe as a bit of a richness booster alongside milk. And there are a lot of other recipes from the same period that use milk, so you can use that for a lighter version if you want. We're then told, boil it with a blade of mace, nutmeg and a piece of cinnamon. So we're pouring our 3 pints of cream into a saucepan and turning it onto a medium heat. I don't actually want to boil this as the recipe says, because my hob is obviously a lot more powerful than a charcoal fire from the 1700s. I'm not bragging, it's just true. And then adding into the cream some ground mace, because I don't have any blades of the stuff lying around, 1 whole nutmeg seed, and 1 stick of cinnamon. Once infused, we're told to take it off the fire, so I'm setting it aside for the next stage of the recipe. Because posset became so popular during the 16 and 1700s, you have a lot of really respected cookery writers who are clearly keen to put their spin on the classic. One such person was friend of the show, Sir Kenelm Digby, whose descendant Ed actually joined us in an earlier episode where we tried out Kenelm's recipe for cock ale. Still fun to say. So Kenelm's recipe is really similar to the one that I've used today. The main difference is that it contains a rare and unique ingredient that comes from the bowels of sperm whales. Yeah, let that sink in. Now I know what you're thinking. Why is this person talking about whale poo when I just came here for a cocktail recipe? Well, I'll tell you. Ambergris, otherwise known as floating gold, is essentially a compacted clump of matter excreted from sperm whales. So when a sperm whale meets a giant squid and thinks it looks a bit tasty, the sperm whale's digestive system can't break down some parts of the squid, including its beak. A lot of the time, the whale will apparently just vomit this out, but more rarely, the whale is unable to spit it out. And so these tough squid parts pass into the whale's intestines and over time become a lump that the whale can either poo out or vomit out. No one's really sure. And this substance, ambergris, has been prized throughout history. Ancient Egyptians used it for incense, and you had some people using it as plague deterrents during the Black Death. But like any specialist substance, at some point wealthy people started trying to eat it. There have been recipes recorded of ambergris being used in Turkish coffee or sherbet from Persia, even ice cream, and there are even accounts that King Charles II liked his eggs flavoured with ambergris. Because apparently, nothing says breakfast quite like egg topped with dry-aged whale indigestion. Back to the posset. We need to take the yolks of 16 eggs and the whites of 8 eggs, beat them, and strain them through a fine mesh sieve. Once the eggs have been beaten together, the recipe simply tells us to mix the hot cream and the egg mixture together. There isn't any guidance on how to avoid our posset turning into scrambled egg, so I'm going to pour in a few ladlefuls of our hot cream to the egg mix, whisking as I go. Going to repeat this a few times, which should allow the eggs to slowly come up to temperature without scrambling them, at which point I can fully combine the two mixtures, pour them back into the saucepan and set it on a low heat whilst I prepare the next stage of the recipe, which we'll come back to in a minute. These days, most people think of posset, presuming they actually do think of posset at all, as a creamy dessert. But like most foods, it's had a long and meandering history from then to eggnog now. In the 1200s, monks would make drinks made out of ale and eggs and then sweetened with figs. In the 1400s, posset was more medicinal, where it was given to wealthy people as something when they were feeling poorly. We even have accounts of King Charles I being given posset by his physician when he was unwell in 1620. But how does all of this get us from posset to eggnog? Well, because also in the 1700s, sack posset was growing very popular in America. However, people realised that it was a lot easier and cheaper to get rum from the Caribbean instead of getting sack and sherry from Portugal or Spain across the ocean. Thus, America's own twist on the posset, eggnog, began to take shape. Though there are a few different theories about how eggnog became popularised as a Christmas drink. There was one theory that, what with all the cold weather usual around Christmas, it was the best time of year to make a creamy dairy-based drink without it going bad quickly. But given posset's origins as a drink for the wealthy, it's also possible that it was just synonymous with a time of feasting and hospitality. Okay, final stage of the posset. Now we've got our custardy base. The recipe tells us to add to a basin 3 gills of sack, because clearly 3 pints of cream isn't indulgent enough. A gill is the same as a quarter of a pint, so into a jug goes 3/4 of a pint of sherry and a small amount of melted butter for posterity. To our sherry and butter mix, we now need to add in 1/4 pound, about 100 grams, of fine sugar. The recipe then tells you to set it upon a charcoal fire, which I don't have, so I'm settling for the electric approach. I'm going to bring this up on a gentle heat and mix together just until the sugar dissolves, because I don't want to cook off the alcohol. I still want some kind of, creamy buzz from this. Once ready, we need to pour it into our tempered egg and cream mix from up high, whisking constantly. Strain out the spices, and time to take it for a test drive. So like I mentioned earlier, there are lots of recipes for sack posset throughout history, and I chose this one because it's really special to me. Earlier this year, I lost my godfather to cancer. One of the last messages I still have from him was from earlier this year, where he sent me a really lovely message, having watched the show for the first time and being very supportive. But he also sent me a copy of a household recipe book of his family's that he was transcribing back from the 1700s. And I spent a long time this year reading through it and trying to work out what I wanted to recreate for the show in his honor. And then I saw the sack posset recipe, and it just made me think of Christmas and people coming together. So to you and yours. Oh, that's good. It is so rich. It's so thick and creamy. Probably unsurprising given it's got 3 pints of cream in it. But the spices and that sherry, that is naughty, naughty custard. Oh, I got a moustache now. Yeah. If I were to make this again, I'd put some milk in there. Even if it was half cream, half milk, it just needs a little bit more liquid. This is literally feels like drinking melted ice cream. But the flavor is incredible. The nutmeg and the mace really come through. It actually could probably do with a little bit more sugar. I don't know how wealthy his ancestors would have been, so maybe they were trying to save money on the sugar. But also there's a good chance that if it were sweeter as well as this rich, it would just send me to sleep, which is exactly what I'm gonna do right now. So Merry Christmas, and I'll see you in the new year.